use certain scriptures from the Hebrew scriptures or the Old Testament to make that a principle in their minds. But really, it's just about protecting the money. Because if principle was really what was most important, protecting children would come first and foremost. But they realize that at the end of the day, while I do think many of them do genuinely believe what they're doing is right, they also know that they are running a business. They are running a corporation in a sense. So they have to protect the mothership.
Absolutely. Multi-billion-dollar mothership. So that's going to be protected at all costs. And it's really sad that all these people are thrown by the wayside. But in essence, asking those questions, they're really just telling on themselves. It really is what they're doing. So having said that, now you have the abuse, the sexual abuse, and some people have multiple abuses on top of that, which creates a lot of anxiety and other mental health issues. Why is it that they are so against, and it probably plays into what we just said, but I want to hear you talk about it. Why is it that the elders, when people come to them and saying, hey, I'm feeling depressed or I'm worn or all these things, they're basically crying out for help. Why are they steering people away from that? And I really hope the listeners are paying attention to this, because they are steering people away from getting the help they need. Why are they doing this?
Right. And this, again, comes back to the control that they need to have as a religious organization. It's funny, I just mentioned this in one of the Instagram comments that I replied to. I gave a public talk once, and the whole talk, I don't remember the official name of the talk, but basically it was about getting rid of anxiety and, finding peace. And so at one point during the talk, I had written into my script to mention that if you're facing mental health issues, you should seek a professional, a therapist. And after I gave that talk, I got off the stage and one of the elders brought me to the side and counseled me. He said, you want to be careful about recommending therapists to people in the congregation. And what this comes down to is really just control, because they fear people going to a therapist who will tell them, hey, maybe part of your issues are coming from this religion, or maybe all of your issues are coming from this religion.
That's it.
And when they get this quote unquote worldly advice, it'll open up their minds to realize, hey, if the Jehovah's Witnesses aren't helping me with this, what else are they not helping me with? And that's really what the elders are afraid of. It's much for the same reason that they don't recommend people to seek higher education. They don't want you to open up your mind. They want you to stay in a bubble and be ignorant to the things of the quote unquote world. Because if you're ignorant to that, you won't question what you're told in the Jehovah's Witness organization. You'll accept it and it'll be perfect to you because you'll have nothing to compare it to.
Right. Absolutely. I'm glad to hear you say it. I know that, but I just want the listeners to hear you say that. It's really the crux of a cult, just keeping that mind wrapped in foolishness, basically. But I want to reference one of your videos right here. 2 common sense reasons proving that JWs are in a cult. The first one is no brainer, right? Trying to disconnect you from everything that you know. But it was the second one. When I was looking at this yesterday, I just thought, damn, it caught me. I grew up in this, but it still hit me. And you said, any group that would ask you to kill yourself is a cult. Can we talk about that? Because I'm sure that's in relation to the blood doctrine. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those things that I had always had some doubts about. I had quieted it, a little bit here and there, but it was always a bit of a troubling doctrine to me, because you're told as a witness, Jehovah values life and he is the source of life and you should respect life. And that's why you shouldn't, bungee jump and do skydiving, because you're risking your life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're being told, hey, if your life is on the line and the only thing that can save you is getting a blood transfusion, don't do it. It doesn't make sense. And for me, I had never really faced any situations where my life was in danger personally. But once I got married, my wife had a medical issue where she might have had to take blood. And it really caused me to think to myself, like, would I really allow my wife to die if the doctor said she needed blood? No, that doesn't make sense. That's ridiculous. So while I guess in a sense I was living a double life because I said, yeah, she definitely needs that blood if she needs it.
Yeah.
Out loud, I never would have told anyone that. But to myself, I'm thinking that's ridiculous. Why would I let someone die when they have the means to keep them alive? And it really goes to show how much of a cult the Jehovah's Witnesses are. Most people tend to think of the Jehovah's Witnesses as just like this odd Christian group rather than a cult. But anytime you're dealing with literal life and death, there's no question that you're talking about a cult. And when we think of cults, a lot of people tend to think about, for example, the People's Temple with Jim Jones in Guyana. And everyone, knows the story about drinking the Flavor Aid and how, close to 1,000 people died. And it's so popular that we literally use the phrase, don't drink the Kool-Aid. But Jehovah's Witnesses are so much more dangerous than Jim Jones because we've had literally hundreds of thousands of Jim Jones type situations because people have died from not taking blood transfusions. And we tend to not think of it in that way because with the People's Temple and Jim Jones, all those people died at once. But since the blood doctrine has been initiated, we're talking over, hundreds of thousands of people that have died. So that makes the Jehovah's Witnesses 10, 20, 30 times more dangerous than Jim Jones.
Absolutely, man. Lethal, slow boiling, you know what I mean? They're congregants. I remember, and I'm sure you remember as a kid when it's time to go on that school field trip and you had to fill out the trip slip. My mother would always write in her handwriting, no blood, next to that checkbox. And I always remember taking that to school, just staring at it, realizing now that my mother, in her own handwriting, is authorizing my demise, my death, And the reason I'm saying that is because I want people to know it's one of those things, those hidden things in this organization that slowly erodes your confidence and self-esteem. To know that your life, it tells you that your life is really worthless. You know what I mean? So having said all that, as an elder, I don't know if you've seen anything like that, but what is the mindset of 3, 4, 5, 6 men who get a call about someone being at the hospital needing a blood transfusion, and they're running down there to say, no, you can't do this? How does that work?
Yeah, thankfully, I was never in one of those life or death situations, but I did have, a few situations as an elder where, we got a call, hey, Sister Smith or Sister Jones she's sick and she's not doing too good. So we need some brothers to come down to the hospital. And for me, it was always really intimidating having to come into a hospital and be this, this quote unquote big shot elder, because you watch movies and sometimes you see like a priest sitting next to a bed, or like, someone's reverend from their church sitting next to their bed. And I came to realize like, I'm doing the same thing in effect. I'm sitting next to their bed and I'm reading them scriptures and I'm praying with them. And what always came, every time I went to visit someone in the hospital, it always seemed to come up, brother, can you just look over my DPA card, my blood card, and make sure that everything's all right? And I remember the first time I had to do that, I was actually a ministerial servant the first time I went to go see someone in the hospital in that way. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, they really could die. And it just gave me an intense feeling of sadness and fear for them, because even though at the time I believed that they were doing the right thing to please this deity who somehow has this issue with us taking blood, but it just felt so wrong, you know, and I guess that's when people say they don't go against your gut feeling, that's what that was. But it truly is a really daunting position, and to see so many elders treat hospital visits as cavalier as they did, you know, I don't want to call these people bad people necessarily, because they may not be. It might just be years of experience of them doing this, but it always felt odd to me going to the hospital and recommending medical advice. You know, I'm not a doctor. Why should I be recommending medical advice?
Yeah. I keep saying, man, you have to at some point cut off your empathy, whether you were or were not before, but you have to do it. And it is mainly this doctrine why I do not have or subscribe to any belief systems at this point, because it ultimately just stops you from thinking. And that is the only design of it. So I always wondered and hope my dad never had anything to do with that, but it was just really tough for me to deal with. I want to move back over into the judicial process that you guys have. In the religion, there's a I'm going to say it, there's a snitching culture, right? Because I'm willing to bet you'll agree that most of the people that you had to reprove or disfellowship, somebody told on them, right? So can you walk me through that decision, in addition to all of the different videos we've seen of people saying how the elders are asking them these despicable questions? So can you walk me through that judicial process?
Yeah, so the way that a judicial meeting gets formed is normally either someone comes to confess that they committed some serious sin, or someone comes to the elders and says, hey, I know that this person committed a serious sin. And more than often,
Yeah.
it's the snitching. The snitching is more than often how it happens.
Yeah.
So in that case, what happens is we have an elders meeting. 2 elders are selected to investigate the claims. And then once they investigate, if they find it to be true, a judicial committee of usually 3 brothers is formed, one being the chairman and 2 brothers assisting them. Now, it's a very, very invasive and very unfair system, because first things first, 9 out of 10 judicial cases are something that have to deal with something of a sexual nature. So already you're talking about something that is very intimate and really none of anyone's personal business. It's not business what goes on with anyone else's body, especially their private parts. So you have one person sitting across from 3 elders, and they're asking them intimate questions that lead up to how this quote unquote sin happened. And it's very intimidating. It's very embarrassing. And the questions that not only that I've heard of, but that I heard in judicial committees that I was in are just, you know, they're off the wall. Like, there's no reason to be asking people, you know, if they were prophylactic or if they orgasmed. Like, what? In what world do I need to know that about anyone?
Yeah. If you got a Jimmy on, you know?
You know?
Yeah, man, I've seen so many videos about that, and you know, I can't make it work in my head at all, you know, in any way, shape, or form. But when I was young, I went to see, I'm gonna date myself, but I went to see Terminator, right? So you're talking about the 80s. And I went with people that I grew up with and some outsiders. This was a Saturday night, right? Sunday morning, every Sunday, I washed the car before the meeting. I was in the garage getting some stuff. I didn't know that they had already told on me, right? And my dad comes in, it's like 7:30 in the morning, grabs me from behind. I never heard him. My dad's 6'4", 250. I never heard him. And grabs me from behind, from the front of my shirt, picks me up and slams me into the wall. You understand? So I had a little dribble that day, you know what I'm saying? But that's how serious it is, you know, to elders. My dad was presiding overseer, so he has a lot to lose. But I'm telling that story for people to understand this is how serious it is when you run afoul of the Jehovah's Witness law. It's on at home, you know what I mean? So
yeah, that's interesting because it's funny. I actually just watched the Terminator for the first time
yeah.
a few days ago. um,